Hey guys, what is up? Chris here with Cohesive Friendship Unit. Just me today. Animal Crossing at this point has been out for 1 month, and this is a long game. This is a game where real time matters, and this is a game where you are somewhat expected to come back daily or at the very least weekly to really get the most out of this game. It is kind of a sim game after all, and it does take place in real human Earth time. So it's important to revisit Animal Crossing as a game, revisit thoughts on the game, and revisit the long-lasting ability of this game. We did a review, which you guys are welcome to check out. It's much more in depth, but I did call it in the review. I'll be curious to know if this has any sort of staying power, and especially since this game is getting probably a lot more attention than it would any other year because I'm stuck at home, it has a lot to live up to. So yeah, we're going to dive right in, explore these ideas, but before we do, please consider subscribing, and if you found this video helpful, please throw us a like. We'd really appreciate your support. So this may seem kind of strange, especially for a game like Animal Crossing, but I'm going to kind of compare it to something like a real-time strategy game, like an RTS, or even in some ways like a roguelike. Usually in these types of genres, a MOBA also, you have stages to a particular run or a particular game. And those are, like early game, mid game, late game. And what you do during that time is very different than what you're doing in like the late game. In StarCraft, during the super early game, you might be prioritizing farming resources or doing a lot of like micro scouting. This is something that you wouldn't be doing as much in the late game when you have more units to control, you're doing more coordinated attacks, etc. So just keep that in mind. What I'm getting at is this game, Animal Crossing, shares similarities to these games where there are definitely stages in how the game progresses, and it's kind of interesting to think about just from like a game design standpoint. But basically, my example of early game, and we reviewed Animal Crossing 7 days after the game had come out, so we had 7 days. I would say that was transitioning out of early game into mid game. Early game, we're shaking all the trees and we're chopping all the wood. My other islander could fish literally for hours. She would be literally fishing for up to like 6 hours a day, just catching fish. And at the time, that is it's a novel concept. You're grinding fish. You're when you're building out that initial catalog of insects and fish, it is exciting because the rate of new creatures actually keeps you going for what is ultimately a mundane fishing minigame. And then another thing that you do a lot is grinding Nook Miles, especially once you get Nook Miles Plus. That's another thing that early on, you can really just run that for hours and just get familiar, get your palate wet with what the game can truly offer. Going to remote islands is also a huge thing. Like when resources are limited and Tom Nook is saying, you have to get 30 iron by this time, basically you're resource strapped in the early game, much like in an RTS. And that requires you to, grind these Nook miles so that you can buy the Nook Island tickets, so that you can go to the island and mine the resources you need, bring them back to Nook. This is all what we described in the review as Animal Crossing Brain, where you're just kind of sucked into this like loop. But that has evolved, and that has evolved in a good way, right? Like I said, if you were just fishing for 6 hours a day, 30 days later, that wouldn't be enjoyable. But at the time it was, because you were getting so many new creatures and it was a novel idea. Nintendo knew, Animal Crossing developers knew that would not last. And so they seamlessly transitioned to more pressing things as you start to get a hold of the game's mechanics, as you start to craft your town, as you start to finish the Tom Nook goals. Slowly, new things start opening up. Things like the Nook and Cranny store, things like the clothing store, and slowly things start to be given to you like terraforming. And this evolves your kind of daily habit on how you play the game. Now you're focused on paying off your mortgage, which was something that you were doing earlier, but it's more of a central focus when there's nothing else to do. Not nothing, but when Tom Nook isn't feeding you tasks to do. And you're no longer resource strapped, because just in general, there's more now that once you have the ladder and the vaulting pole, you can get to more things, and you've generally planted more trees. You have more than an abundance of resources to deal with. Shopping is also a big thing. Now that you've established these trees and these fruits, and you've gone to people's islands, you have different fruits, you're investing in the stock market, shopping becomes a huge deal. And it is fun to shop and check in all the stores, see what the new clothes are, see if the rug seller is around, see if the shoe and handbags seller's around. Shopping is a huge and fun part of the game. Designing also kind of takes a step forward as you unlock things like terraforming, and you get more furniture, and you have more money to spend on furniture, and you have more real estate in your house, and Tom Nook starts to encourage it. Designing becomes a much bigger thing, where you will be terraforming, you will be making custom furniture, trying to pair items, come up with a good, cool room concept. And turnips, the stock market, right? That's always a fun Sunday to Sunday adventure for all of us investors out there. I guess what I'm saying is there's really seamless and really solid design that carries you through the first 30 days of this game. And it was definitely intentional, and it was definitely mastercraft. And this is basically allowed for the game to stay fresh entirely for 30 days. And not only fresh, but you're doing new things that you weren't doing on day one. And the things that you're doing on day 30, I hardly ever fish. You know, if it's a new month, I'll check what the fish are, but I'm not fishing for bells because there's new things to do. And that's good game design. A couple thoughts of criticism as I played the game more, and this is kind of criticism from the review also. Online is increasingly frustrating. It's just cumbersome and annoying. There's no real way around it, but it's Nintendo, so honestly, for a Nintendo game, the multiplayer is not that bad. And dialogue can be poorly set up. It is annoying to have to talk through the same route of dialogue literally 5 times in a row just to get something very simple done. If you want to mail a letter to the same letter to multiple friends, you can't do that. You have to mail the letter, go through the dialogue, mail the letter, go through it's annoying. And that extends out into something like the clothing boutique, where you can only use the changing room, which has most of the items you can buy. You can only pick what you can wear at any given one time. So if you want 2 shirts, you have to buy a shirt, leave the changing room, go back in, buy the shirt, leave it. It's annoying. But all in all, super positive vibes on this game. Super clever design to get you through 30 days of playing it every day and keeping it fresh. And I look forward to the months to come.